And so following from Locke's identity issues, we have numerical versus qualitative. I'm not going to ever ask you to get into that level of specificity. I'm never going to say on a quiz, well, why is the doctor, how do we know who the doctor is? Give me his numerical information. The idea, though, is you should be able to recognize what these mean. A qualitative identity is two objects have exactly the same properties. So, for example, if Jenny and Sue are wearing the same dress, the dress is identical because it has the exact same properties. Whether it's on Jenny or Sue, it's still the same dress. So it is qualitatively identical. Numerical identity is if A and B are one and the same. For example, Clark Kent is the same person as Superman. So they are numerically identical. The only difference is a change of outfit, change of clothes. But at the end of the day, Clark Kent is the same person as Superman. And so there's no pulling them apart and making them different people. They are numerically identical. And so personal identity is about numerical identity, being the same person. Not am I just the same person as I was 10 years ago, but rather am I the same person, or are there two people now? One that existed 10 years ago but no longer, and me now. In other words, was the John Fields who existed at 8, did he cease to exist? And then starting at 9, a new John Fields started to exist, and I'm completely different from that previous version. That would be the qualitative. And that's not how we deal with personal identity. We view it as a continuum, that you are who you are throughout your life with certain changes. And this comes into play from Heraclitus when he says you cannot step in the same river twice. The idea is that the river is constantly changing. It's qualitatively different because anytime we take, if we were just to take a snapshot of a portion of this river right now, the river's still flowing. So whatever water I captured in my moment, it's no longer there. It's gone. And so I can't step back into that exact same bundle of molecules in that same space because they're gone. But we name the river the entire length of this running body of water. So it is possible for me to step into the same body of water, but not the same exact water. So the river is constantly changing. It's qualitatively different constantly. And so it's not going to be the same river. It's numerically different. Meaning every time I go to this spot, if this particular picture is where I go every single July 5th, and I camp out there, I can always say I go to Black's Creek. I don't even know what this picture is, but let's say Black's Creek. Well, Black's Creek is a name we give for ease of comprehension. If I were to say, I'm going to what was Black Creek's last year, but now something else, and 2 years ago it was the Red's Creek, and before that it was Yellow's Creek, that doesn't help. So as humans, we like stability of name, and so we name it Mississippi River. But the water in the Mississippi River at any given time is probably different, because the water that at this exact moment is in Minnesota 3 days from now will be in the Gulf of Mexico. And different water will have replaced it. So because it's constantly changing, its identity changes a bit. But it's still the Mississippi River, and we still stick with that. And that's how we're going to look at ourselves and the doctor. Finally, we have David Hume in this early group of English philosophers. And his idea of the self came about that there were three essential properties. That your identity and your idea of you is continuous through time. It doesn't change. You always think you are you. It is perfectly numerical, meaning it's identical from one time to the next. And it is perfectly simple. There's no parts. Basically, it cannot lose part of itself. This one runs into a little bit of difficulty because, number two, it is perfectly identical from one time to the next. Well, if we're going to go strictly on this, what happens to a wounded warrior who loses a body part in a war? Then he is not strictly numerically identical any longer, because when he went to war he had 2 legs, he looked a certain way, now he comes back with 1. He's not numerically identical as before he left. But none of us would say that he's not the same person. His personality can change, some characteristics can change, but he's still Captain X who left before and has come back. His identity is still the same, though now how we view him and he views us may change. But again, it's much different from what he is, his core person. Looking at these ideas, comes to think of this idea, do we have a private self and a public self? If we have someone who's a wounded warrior and we say acts differently now, can you act differently in one instance than you would in another? For example, how do you act when you're at home by yourself with, I don't know, if you live with your family, with one of your siblings or a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, versus then when you all go out to dinner with another family. We do have public selves and private selves. We act differently in the private life than we do when we're in public. We have a difference of social mores impacting on us. Sometimes in the private we can express our private thoughts and feelings that it's not appropriate to do in the public sphere. So this also makes a difference on who our identity is. How well do we control that private self versus public self? Or even do we? Some people are open books no matter what, and they always have the same person presented at all times, whether they're in private or not. And the two opposing views here, it matters not what you are thought to be, but what you are. So it doesn't matter what people think of you, but who you truly are. Or on the other hand, Eric Hoffer says, we are what other people say we are. We know ourselves chiefly by hearsay. And these are the people who allow their self-image to be manipulated by those around them. Someone who thinks, a young lady who thinks she's, perfectly wonderful, great dancer, hears a coach say, well, you could stand to lose 5 pounds. Well, suddenly her identity is going to change a little bit. She's going to think she's overweight, and that she's going to be impacted by that criticism. And that may change a little bit. And that can have far-reaching changes, or it can just have changes. She'll lose her 5 pounds and move on from there. And so we have to decide as ourselves, what are our core beliefs? Not only who am I? I'm John Fields, professor of French humanities and business law, blah, blah, blah. Not only that do I have to decide what my identity is, but who am I? What are my core ethical beliefs? What are my core beliefs of myself? How do I see myself? Who am I? How do I define myself? And once you get that core belief and you know who you are, then the private public self doesn't matter. What other people think that you should be, it won't matter, because you will have established a firm core self identity. And that's the important aspect.